In this video, we are going to talk about the mercenaries of ancient India. In ancient Indian armies, mercenaries played an important role. And we find that in the ancient literature, two terms have been used to describe these mercenaries. These terms were Shreni Bal and Bhritya Bal. So the term Bhritya Bal means mercenary forces. Bhritya is mercenary, Bal is force. The second term, Shreni Bal, means guild forces. So the Shrenis or guilds of ancient India were organization of, let's say, traders, merchants, craftsmen, artisans, etc. So what we see is that on the face of it, these two terms, that is Bhritya Bal and Shreni Bal, would appear quite similar. But that is not the case. Because when we read Kautilya's Arthashastra, we can clearly see that there existed a great difference between these two terms. Kautilya tells us that Bhritya Bal is superior to Shreni Bal. Now this has to do with the fact that Bhritya Bal or mercenary forces obey the order of the king. So Kautilya tells us that whenever a king wants them to march, these Bhritya forces or mercenary forces would march. But when we talk about the guild forces, Kautilya also has something good to say. Kautilya tells us that one of the best qualities of these Shreni forces was the fact that these Shreni forces belonged to the same country. So here you can see that there was a major difference between these two terms. So in this reading, we can clearly see that Shreni forces or guild forces were from the same country. But this was not the case with Bhritya Bal or mercenary forces. Now this is only one aspect of the difference between the two terms. What we see is that the term Bhritya Bal is not as complex as the term Shreni Bal. And this has to do with the fact that there is a debate on how should we understand what constitute a Shreni Bal. So some scholars have argued that these Shreni Bal or guild forces were basically mercenaries that had the same structure as that of the guilds. Now some scholars believe that this was not the case. They argue that these guild forces or Shreni Bal were soldiers that were deployed by a particular guild. So suppose there is a guild of merchants. So what this guild would do is that they would employ certain number of soldiers. So that is why these soldiers were called guild forces or Shreni Bal. Now when we look at our evidence, we can see that both of these definitions could be easily corroborated. So for example, in Kautilya's Arthashastra, Kautilya talks about Kshatriya Shrenis, and these Kshatriya Shrenis were from Kamboj, Saurashtra, etc. And Kautilya tells us that these Kshatriya Shrenis lived on trade, agriculture, and they also wielded weapons. Apart from Kautilya, we see that in Panini's Ashtadhyayi, he is talking about Ayudhjivi Sangha or warrior republics. So the term Ayudhjivi literally means those who lived on war. So in this source, we can see that he is talking about some type of organization whose main profession was warfare. Now in both of these evidence, we can clearly see that they are talking about an organization whose main purpose or whose main duty was warfare, and they lived on warfare, as Panini would say. But another evidence would suggest that there existed a certain number of soldiers or people who were deployed by the guild or who were members of the guild, and their sole purpose was soldiering. So this evidence comes from the region of Mandsaur, and this inscription dates back to around 5th century AD. This inscription tells us about the guild of silk weavers, and it tells us that some members of this guild became excessively good in Dhanurvidya. So the term Dhanurvidya here means that these people became good at warfare. So basically this inscription is telling us that they became good soldiers. Apart from this, we have also evidence from early medieval southern India. In early medieval southern India, there existed powerful guilds, and these guilds also deployed soldiers. And we have some evidence that would suggest that the Chola army also got help from these guild forces. So you can see that there existed guilds that deployed some soldiers. From these multiple sources, we could say that there existed two types of Shreni Bal or guild forces. In the first type, a certain number of soldiers were deployed by the guild to protect it. In the second case, we see that the guild itself performed military duties, and the main function was to perform military duties, and most of the members of the guild were soldiers. In ancient Indian literature, the military might of these guilds are recognized, and we see that these guilds could be a source of strength or a source of weakness to a particular kingdom. A source of strength because these guilds provided additional military resources to the ruler in time of need. And they could also become a source of weakness because, as we have noted, these guilds had military resources and they deployed certain number of soldiers. So the fact that they had certain number of soldiers would mean that they could also acquire more power and they could challenge the king itself. This aspect of the guild forces is also recognized by Kautilya. So when Kautilya tells us that mercenary forces are superior to guild forces, he is telling us that since mercenaries are deployed by the king, they are also dependent on the king. But this is not the case with guild forces. Guild forces are not deployed by the king. They are supporting the king, but essentially it is the guild that is deploying them. So this difference in authority means that the mercenaries would be more loyal to the king than the guild forces. Apart from this, Kautilya acknowledges that guild forces are an important part of the state, but he is also aware of the fact that these guild forces could also challenge the authority of the state. So to secure the authority, Kautilya recommends that these guild forces should be deployed in an area which was constantly under the threat of an enemy. So this would mean that Kautilya was aware of the fact that these guild forces pose a serious challenge to the authority of the ruler. Other than Kautilya, we have also Narada Smriti, which is quite distrustful of the guild forces. Narada Smriti tells the king that he should be wary of secret meetings of the guild members, and he should also not tolerate picking up arms by the guild members. So here you can see that how distrustful Narada Smriti is of the guild forces. So both of this text clearly tells us that the thinkers of ancient India were aware of the fact that what kind of danger would these mercenary could pose to the state. If you liked this video, please watch this playlist where I had talked about other aspects of ancient Indian military history. Thank you for watching.